Three riders with blood on their hands approached the Silver Dollar Saloon, where a young widow named Rose McKenna poured whiskey with steady hands. The spring rain hammered the Montana dirt, turning Main Street into a river of mud. Their horses moved slow through the downpour, steam rising from flanks worked hard over too many miles. The men wore the kind of confidence that comes from never meeting consequences. They didn't know that beneath her apron hid the woman who'd killed 14 men before her 25th birthday. The legendary gunfighter they called the Phantom. The Dalton Gang. 31 dead across 4 territories. Men, women didn't matter to them. Fire was their signature. Blood was their language. Their fatal mistake, thinking a 28-year-old widow would be easy prey. The year was 1878, Shadow Creek, Montana Territory, where the railroad brought hope but outlaws still wrote the law in the spaces between stations, where civilization arrived on iron tracks but couldn't reach the dark corners where evil made its home. If you've ever been underestimated, drop a comment below. Hit subscribe because tomorrow we'll tell you about the preacher who was really an outlaw. But first, Rose McKenna's story. The story of how one woman's past caught up with her present and how a legend was forced to remember what she tried so hard to forget. The morning had started peaceful enough. Rose stood behind the bar of the Silver Dollar, polishing glasses that didn't need polishing. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical bun. Her green eyes reflected the early light coming through windows she'd cleaned at dawn. At 28, she carried herself with the kind of quiet grace that made men tip their hats and women trust her with secrets. She wore a simple calico dress, dark blue with small white flowers. An apron covered most of it, spotted with water from the washing she'd done before opening. Her hands moved with precision as she arranged the glasses on shelves behind the bar, each movement efficient, each placement exact. The kind of economy that comes from training, though anyone watching would just see a widow keeping busy. Shadow Creek wasn't much of a town. 247 souls at last count, most of them scratching silver from the mountains or running cattle through the valley. Main Street ran straight for 3 blocks before giving up and becoming a dirt road that led to ranches scattered across the territory. The Silver Dollar sat right in the middle, the beating heart of a small community that depended on each other because help was always 3 days away. The saloon itself was modest, 20 feet wide, 40 feet deep. A bar ran along the left wall. Tables filled the main floor. A staircase in back led to 3 rooms upstairs, where Rose lived in one and rented the others to travelers when the stagecoach came through. The building smelled of wood smoke and whiskey and the lye soap Rose used to keep the floors clean. She set down the glass she'd been polishing and reached for another. That's when her hand froze. A sound. Faint but distinct. Horses. Multiple horses. Still maybe 2 miles out, coming from the east. Most people wouldn't have heard it. The rain covered everything. But Rose heard it. Her ears had been trained to catch sounds that meant danger. She finished placing the glass, moved to the next one, gave no outward sign. But her mind was already cataloging. 3 horses, maybe 4. Moving steady, not hurried. Riders who knew where they were going. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 6:30 in the morning. Too early for honest travelers. The front door opened. Old Pete Hendricks shuffled in, shaking rain from his hat. He was 70 if he was a day, with a beard like steel wool and eyes that had seen Montana when it was still wild in ways that would make modern folks uncomfortable. He'd been coming to the Silver Dollar every morning for 2 years, ever since Rose's husband Jack had died, and she'd taken over running the place alone. "Coffee strong today, Miss Rose," Pete said, settling onto his usual stool at the far end of the bar. "Strong enough to wake the dead, Pete," Rose replied. Her voice was warm, gentle, the voice of a woman who'd found peace in a quiet life. She poured him a cup from the pot she kept hot on the stove. Pete wrapped his gnarled hands around it and sighed with satisfaction. For a moment the only sound was rain on the roof and the crackling of the fire Rose had built in the pot-bellied stove that kept the place warm. "Storm's setting in," Pete observed. "Been needed for weeks," Rose said. "Ground's been too dry." She went back to her glasses. Pete sipped his coffee. The comfortable silence of 2 people who'd shared enough mornings that words weren't necessary. But Rose's mind was elsewhere. Those riders. Closer now. Maybe a mile and a half. She could almost feel them coming. The door opened again. Deputy Nathaniel Kirkwood stepped in water streaming from his hat. At 22, Nate was all enthusiasm and book learning. He'd read every law journal he could get his hands on, quoted precedents like scripture, believed in justice with the kind of faith that hadn't been tested yet. "Morning, Miss Rose, Pete." He touched his hat to both of them. "Coffee, Nate?" Rose asked. "Please, ma'am." She poured him a cup. Noticed his hand shook slightly as he took it. Cold from the rain, she thought. Or maybe nerves. Nate had only been deputy for 6 months. Sheriff Wendell Hobbs was 60 years old, his gun hand slowed by arthritis and a belly grown soft from years behind a desk. Most of the real law in Shadow Creek came down to Nate whether he was ready or not. "Quiet night?" Rose asked. "Yes, ma'am. Too quiet almost. Storm kept everyone inside." Rose nodded, set down her cloth. The glass she'd been holding slipped from the shelf. Without looking, her hand shot out and caught it mid-air. The movement was so fast it seemed to happen in the space between heartbeats. The glass settled into her palm like it had never been in danger. Pete glanced up from his coffee. Nate blinked. Rose set the glass gently on the bar, her expression unchanged. "Good reflexes," Pete said quietly. "Comes from dropping too many glasses over the years," Rose replied with a slight smile. "But it wasn't reflexes. It was training. Muscle memory from years of drawing a gun faster than thought. The kind of speed that only comes from doing something 10,000 times until the body knows it better than the mind." Rose folded her hands on the bar and kept her face pleasant. The door opened a third time. Reverend Josiah Blackwood entered shaking rain from his long black coat. At 45, he had the weathered look of a man who'd seen the world before finding God. His hands were too scarred for a man who'd only ever held a Bible. His eyes too sharp. But he preached good sermons, and the people of Shadow Creek trusted him. "Rose, gentlemen," he greeted them. Reverend Rose replied, "Coffee." "Bless you, yes." She poured a fourth cup. The Reverend took it and stood by the stove, warming himself. For a moment, the four of them occupied the space in comfortable quiet. The rain, the fire, the coffee, a peaceful morning in a small town. Then Rose heard it. The horses. Close now, maybe a quarter mile. She didn't move, didn't change expression, but every nerve in her body came alive. Reverend Blackwood was watching her. Their eyes met for just a second. He knew. Somehow he knew she'd heard something. His expression didn't change, but his hand moved slightly beneath his coat. Old habits, Rose thought. He wasn't the only one with a past. The sound of hoofbeats became audible even to normal ears. Pete looked toward the door. Nate straightened on his stool. The Reverend set down his coffee cup. 5 riders appeared through the rain. They came slow down Main Street, their horses picking through the mud. Even from inside, even through the rain-streaked windows, Rose could see they didn't belong. They sat their saddles like men who'd spent more time running than resting. Their coats were expensive but mud-splattered, their hats pulled low. The lead rider was tall in the saddle. Even slouched against the rain, he had presence. The kind that comes from being the most dangerous man in any room he enters. He wore a gray duster that had seen hard miles. His hat was black water streaming from its wide brim. The 5 of them stopped in front of the Silver Dollar, sat their horses in the rain, looking at the building, at the sign hanging above the door, at the windows with their warm light promising dry shelter. "Expecting company, Miss Rose?" Nate asked. His hand had drifted toward the revolver on his hip. "Never met them before in my life," Rose said. Her voice was level. The lead rider dismounted, hit the ground with the grace of a man comfortable with violence. He was younger than Rose had thought, maybe 35, handsome in a hard way, clean-shaven when most men wore beards. When he smiled up at his companions, a flash of gold caught the light, a gold tooth in front. The others dismounted. One was massive, 6'4" at least, with a scar running from his eye to his jaw like someone had tried to split his face in half and nearly succeeded. Another was lean and nervous, couldn't be more than 17, kept touching the gun at his hip like he was reassuring himself it was still there. The last 2 were identical twins, pale blonde hair and cold blue eyes moved with the synchronized ease of men who'd fought together so long they didn't need words. They tied their horses, didn't hurry, took their time like they owned the place, owned the town, owned the whole territory, and were just letting everyone else live there out of generosity. The door swung open hard enough to bang against the wall. The lead rider stepped in first. Rain dripped from his coat onto Rose's clean floor. His eyes swept the room, took in Pete, Nate, the Reverend, dismissed them, settled on Rose. "Well now," he said. His voice was smooth, educated, the accent of somewhere back east that had been roughened by years out west. "What do we have here? A pretty little bartender playing businesswoman." His men filed in behind him, spread out naturally to cover the room. The big one moved toward the stove. The twins took positions by the windows. The nervous kid stayed by the door, hand still near his gun. Rose kept her hands on the bar, kept her expression pleasant. "Gentlemen, welcome to the Silver Dollar. Coffee or whiskey?" The lead rider approached the bar, leaned against it like he was settling in for the afternoon, close enough that Rose could smell the trail on him. Horse sweat, gunpowder, something else, something that smelled like smoke and fear. "Whiskey, your best bottle." "2 bits a glass," Rose said. "I'll run a tab." He smiled again. That gold glinted. Rose reached for a bottle, poured 1 glass, set it in front of him. "I don't run tabs for strangers, mister. 2 bits up front." The smile didn't waver. "You've got spirit. I like that in a woman." 2 bits, Rose repeated. The big man by the stove laughed, deep and rumbling. "Boss, you getting turned down by a bartender." The lead rider's eyes never left Rose. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Rose McKenna. I own this establishment. And I'd appreciate payment for the whiskey." "McKenna." He rolled the name around like he was tasting it. "Widow McKenna, I'm guessing. No ring, but you run a saloon alone. Husband dead, ran off. Didn't have the spine to keep a woman like you satisfied." Pete shifted on his stool. Nate's hand moved closer to his gun. Reverend Blackwood remained perfectly still, but Rose could feel the tension radiating from him. "My husband died 2 years ago," Rose said. Her voice was ice. "Of pneumonia. He was a good man, and you still owe me 2 bits. The rider reached into his pocket, pulled out a coin, flipped it on the bar. It spun, caught the light, settled with a metallic ring. Rose picked it up, examined it. A $20 gold eagle. "That'll cover me and my boys for the day," the man said. "This is more than I can change," Rose replied. "Keep it. Consider it a down payment on hospitality." He leaned closer, close enough that Rose could see the flecks of amber in his brown eyes, could see the small scar on his chin, could count the days since he'd last slept in a real bed. "We're going to be in Shadow Creek for a while. Might as well get to know each other." Rose set the coin on the bar, pushed it back toward him. "I don't need charity. 2 bits for the whiskey or you can move along." The smile finally faded. "You've got a sharp tongue, Widow. Careful it doesn't get you in trouble." "Trouble already walked in my door," Rose said, "tracked mud on my floor, and owes me 2 bits for whiskey it's drinking." The tension in the room pulled tight as wire. The big man's hand drifted toward his gun. The twins straightened from their positions. The kid by the door looked like he might bolt or draw, impossible to tell which. Then the lead rider laughed, genuine amusement. "You know what I like you, Rose McKenna. You've got more spine than most men I know." He reached into a different pocket, pulled out 2 bits, set them precisely on the bar. There, paid in full. Rose took the coins, dropped them in her cash box. "Thank you kindly." The man picked up his whiskey, drained it in 1 swallow, set the glass down harder than necessary. "I'm Cole Dalton. These are my associates. We're going to be guests of your fine town for a few days, maybe a week. Depends on how hospitable folks are." Dalton. The name hit Rose like a fist. The Dalton gang. She'd heard the stories, read the wanted posters that occasionally made it to Shadow Creek. 31 confirmed dead, towns burned, women widowed, children orphaned. They were supposed to be down in Wyoming, supposed to be someone else's problem. "We don't get many visitors this time of year," Rose said, kept her voice level. "That right." Cole looked around the saloon like he was appraising it for purchase. "Quiet little town. I can see why you'd like it here. Peaceful, out of the way, the kind of place a person could disappear." The way he said it made Rose's skin prickle, like he knew something, saw something, but that was impossible. She'd been careful. 2 years without a whisper of her past, 2 years of being just Rose McKenna, widow and saloon owner. Cole's eyes moved to Nate, took in the deputy badge. "Law in Shadow Creek. How civilized." "Deputy Nathaniel Kirkwood," Nate said. His voice only shook a little. "Sheriff Hobbs will want to know your business here." "Our business is our own deputy." Cole's voice went cold. We're just passing through, resting our horses, spending some money in local establishments. Last I checked, that wasn't a crime in Montana territory. Depends on whose money you're spending, Nate replied. The big man stepped away from the stove. You calling us thieves, boy? I'm saying the Dalton gang is wanted in 4 territories, Nate said. Braver than Rose would have given him credit for. And I'm saying you match the descriptions on the posters. Cole's expression remained pleasant, but his eyes went flat. Posters lie. Names get confused. You ever think about that, deputy? How many innocent men get hassled because they look like someone on a piece of paper? Are you innocent men? Nate asked. Are any of us? Cole spread his hands. But we haven't broken any laws in Shadow Creek, yet. And unless you're planning to arrest us for drinking whiskey on a rainy morning, I suggest you go about your business and let us go about ours. The standoff held for 5 heartbeats. 10. Nate was outmatched, and everyone in the room knew it. 5 guns against 1, and Nate had never shot a man in his life. Rose could see him calculating, could see the moment he decided discretion was the better part of valor. I'll be watching, Nate said. I'm sure you will be, deputy. Cole turned back to Rose. Another glass, Mrs. McKenna, since I've got credit. Rose poured, her hands calm, no tremor, no sign that her heart was hammering against her ribs. She'd faced worse than Cole Dalton, faced it, and survived it. But that was another life, another name. Another woman who'd died and been buried along with her husband. Cole took the second glass, sipped it slow this time. You keep a clean place, Mrs. McKenna. Floors are spotless, windows shine, everything in its place. His eyes traveled along the shelves behind her. You know much about firearms. It was a test. Rose knew it immediately. I know enough to keep one under the bar in case of trouble. Smart woman. But do you know how to use it? I know which end the bullets come out of, Rose said. Cole laughed. I bet you do. He finished his whiskey. Set the glass down gentle this time. We'll be seeing more of each other, Mrs. McKenna. Shadow Creek's a small town. Hard to avoid, folks. I'll look forward to it, Rose lied. Cole touched his hat. His men followed him to the door. The big one last moving backward to keep his eyes on the room. The door closed behind them. The sound of their boots on the wooden walkway. Horses being untied. The jingle of spurs and creak of saddle leather. Then they were gone, riding slow down Main Street toward the general store. The silence in the Silver Dollar was thick enough to cut. Pete released a breath he'd been holding. Nate sagged against the bar. Reverend Blackwood moved to the window, watching the riders disappear into the rain. That was the Dalton gang, Nate said, stating the obvious because someone had to say it out loud. Yes, Rose agreed. They've killed 31 people, burned 6 towns. The last one was Willow Creek just 2 weeks ago. 4 families murdered. The whole place razed to the ground. I know. I should get the sheriff. We should wire for help. The nearest marshal is in Helena, but if we send a telegram right now... Shadow Creek doesn't have a telegraph line, Nate, Rose reminded him gently. We're 3 days from anywhere that does. The reality settled on him like a physical weight. Then we're alone. We've always been alone, Pete said. His voice was steady. Old hands that had seen Indian wars and claimed jumpers and worse. Question is, what are we going to do about it? All eyes turned to Rose. She met their gazes, saw the fear, the hope, the unspoken question. Do you have a plan? We survive, Rose said. We're smart, we're careful, and we don't give them a reason to hurt anyone. And if they don't need a reason, Reverend Blackwood asked. His voice was quiet, but his eyes were sharp. Men like that don't operate on reason, Rose. They operate on power, and right now they have all of it. Rose picked up her cloth, went back to polishing glasses. Then we'll deal with that when it comes. But her mind was already moving, already calculating. 5 men, all armed, all experienced. Cole was smart educated, dangerous in ways that went beyond just being fast with a gun. The big one was muscle, probably slow, but devastating in close quarters. The twins moved like professionals, former military maybe. The kid was unpredictable, nervous energy that could go any direction. And Rose was a widow who ran a saloon. A woman who'd spent 2 years being harmless, being invisible, being safe. Except she'd never been any of those things. Not really. Underneath the apron and the calico dress and the pleasant demeanor, Rose McKenna was someone else entirely. Someone she'd tried very hard to forget. Someone whose hands had killed 14 men before her 25th birthday. The Phantom. They called her that because she moved like smoke, like something not quite real. One moment visible, the next gone, and men died in the spaces between. The fastest draw in 4 territories, maybe faster than that. Fast enough that legends grew around her name, stories that got bigger with each telling until truth and myth were impossible to separate. But the Phantom had died 2 years ago. Buried her guns and her past and her guilt. Married a good man named Jack McKenna, who knew what she'd been and loved her anyway. Built a quiet life in a small town where nobody asked questions about where she'd come from or what she'd left behind. Jack had made her promise. On his deathbed, burning up with fever, drowning in his own lungs, he'd made her swear. No more killing Rose, no matter what. Promise me you'll find another way. Promise me you'll be more than a gun. And she'd promised. Held his hand while he died, and sworn she'd never draw on another human being. She'd kept that promise for 2 years. Now Cole Dalton and his gang had walked into her town, into her saloon, onto her clean floors, and Rose knew with the certainty of someone who'd seen how men like that operated that Shadow Creek was about to bleed. The morning passed slowly. Rose went through the motions of running the saloon, served coffee, swept floors that were already clean, kept her hands busy and her mind churning. Deputy Nate left after an hour, heading to brief Sheriff Hobbs. Pete stayed nursing his coffee, his old eyes watching Rose with an expression she couldn't quite read. Reverend Blackwood remained by the window, watching the rain, watching the street, waiting. Around noon, Doc Silas Brennan came in. He was 52, with gray in his beard and gentle hands that had set bones and delivered babies and tried to save Jack McKenna from pneumonia that couldn't be beaten. He ordered coffee and sat at a corner table, spreading out the medical journal he'd been reading. Rose brought him the coffee. "Doc." "Rose." He looked up at her. His eyes held knowledge, understanding. "I heard we have visitors." "You heard right. The Dalton gang," he said quietly. "I was at Fort Laramie back in '73, April of that year. Saw something I've never forgotten." He paused. A young deputy marshal brought in the Cassidy brothers, 3 of the meanest outlaws Wyoming ever produced. Brought them in alive all by herself, 19 years old and faster than lightning. He looked directly at Rose. Her name was Rose Tucker. Rose's hand tightened on the coffee pot. "Doc, I know who you are," he said, not unkind, just stating fact. "Knew the day you and Jack moved here. Recognized you despite the years, despite the name change. The Phantom, the fastest draw west of the Mississippi." "That girl died, Doc." Rose's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm just a widow now. Are you—" He gestured toward the window, toward the town. "Because that gang out there, they're going to hurt people, Rose. They're going to burn and kill and destroy. And when they do, are you going to stand by and let it happen? Can you—" "I made a promise." "To Jack. I know. I was there." Doc's voice was gentle. "But Jack also asked me something before he died. Asked me to watch over you, to make sure you found happiness, to protect you from yourself if I had to." He reached across the table, touched her hand. "I don't think he meant for you to protect your promise while people died around you." Rose pulled her hand back. "What do you want me to do? Silas, strap on my guns. Walk out there and start shooting, become her again." "I want you to be ready," he said. "Because men like Cole Dalton, they don't just pass through. They take. And when they take from Shadow Creek, when they hurt someone you care about, what's that promise going to be worth?" Rose had no answer. She refilled his coffee and walked away. The afternoon brought more townspeople seeking shelter from the rain, seeking answers, seeking reassurance that the strangers in their midst weren't as dangerous as the rumors said. Abigail Winters came in with her husband Elijah. They ran the general store. Abigail's hands shook as she ordered tea. "They were in the store," she said. "That Mr. Dalton and his men took $50 worth of goods. Said they'd pay later. Said it with courtesy, but his eyes—" She trailed off. "Did they hurt you?" Rose asked. "No. But when Elijah asked for payment, that big one, the one with the scar across his face, he just looked at Elijah. Didn't say a word, just looked. And Elijah stopped asking. Elijah stared at his hands. A good man, honest, worked hard, believed in doing right. but not a fighter. None of them were fighters except maybe Pete, and Pete was 70 years old with hands that shook from age. More stories came through the door with each new arrival. The Dalton gang had been to the livery, the boarding house, the other saloon that Tobias Garrett ran 2 streets over, taking what they wanted, paying when they felt like it, letting the threat of violence hang in the air like smoke. By evening the whole town knew who the strangers were, knew what they'd done in other places, knew that help was 3 days away, and 3 days might as well be 3 years. Sheriff Wendell Hobbs came to the Silver Dollar just before sunset. He was 60 years old and looked older. His arthritis made him move slow. His belly hung over his gun belt, but his eyes were still sharp and his voice still carried authority. "Rose," he greeted her. "Sheriff." He settled onto a stool with a grunt. "Heard about this morning?" "I expect you did." "Deputy Kirkwood wants to try arresting them. Thinks we can hold them in the jail until a marshal arrives." "What do you think?" Rose asked. Hobbs was quiet for a long moment. "I think Nate's a good kid with good intentions. I think he believes in the law like I used to, like I still want to." He looked at Rose, really looked at her. "But I also think 5 armed outlaws against 1 sheriff with arthritis and 1 deputy who's never shot a man is a losing proposition." "So what do? We survive like you said this morning. We keep our heads down. We don't provoke them. And we pray they move on before they decide to do what they did to Willow Creek." It was the smart choice, the safe choice, the choice that might keep people alive. Rose nodded. "I'll pass the word." Hobbs left. The saloon emptied out as people headed home before full dark. Reverend Blackwood was the last to leave. He paused at the door. "Rose, if you need anything, if things go badly, you know where the church is, and you know there's a little girl there who thinks the world of you." Rose's expression softened. "How is Della?" "Asking about you, wondering when you'll come teach her more reading." The Reverend smiled. "That child adores you. Della, 8 years old, orphaned when her parents died of scarlet fever the previous winter." Reverend Blackwood had taken her in, but Rose had spent hours with the girl, teaching her letters, telling her stories, thinking about the adoption papers she and Jack had started before he died. Papers that had arrived the day after Jack's funeral, too late to matter. "Tell her I'll come tomorrow," Rose said. "I will. And Rose, Jack was a good friend. I promised him I'd look after you. I keep my promises." "So do I," Rose said. He studied her face for a moment, then nodded and stepped out into the evening drizzle. Rose locked the door behind him, turned the sign to closed. The saloon was quiet except for the rain and the settling of old wood. She stood in the middle of her floor and looked around at everything Jack had built, everything they'd built together. Then she walked to the back room, lifted a loose floorboard in the corner, reached into the space beneath. Her hands found leather first, the custom holster worn smooth from use, then steel, cold and familiar. 2 Remington 1858 revolvers, silver phoenix engraved on each barrel, her father's mark, the work he'd commissioned when she turned 18, when he'd officially made her his deputy. Rose lifted them out. The weight was exactly as she remembered, perfectly balanced, perfectly deadly. She'd cleaned them monthly for 2 years, even though she'd sworn never to use them. Old habits from a life she'd left behind. Next came the badge, tarnished now, U.S. Deputy Marshal, her name engraved on the back, Rose Tucker. She turned it over in her hands, remembered the day her father had pinned it on her, the pride in his eyes, the weight of responsibility and legacy. Finally, letters tied with black ribbon. She didn't need to read them, knew every word by heart. The last one Jack had written her before the fever took his ability to hold a pen. "Be happy, Rose. Be at peace. Be more than what we were. Promise me." She had promised, and she'd meant it. Rose sat on the floor with her past spread around her. The guns, the badge, the letters, the weight of promises made and kept and now being tested. Outside she heard horses, laughter, glass breaking somewhere down the street. A woman's scream cut short. The sound of Shadow Creek beginning to understand what it meant to host men like the Dalton gang. Rose touched the guns. Her fingers remembered the grip. Muscle memory sparked like electricity. She could feel it all coming back. The speed, the certainty, the cold clarity that came when she let the phantom take over. But she'd promised Jack. Promised him on his deathbed. promised him she'd find another way, be another person, live another life. Rose carefully placed everything back in the hiding spot, replaced the floorboard, stood up and brushed dust from her dress. She'd keep her promise. She'd find another way. She had to believe there was another way. The scream came again, closer this time, more desperate. Rose's hands clenched into fists, her jaw set. Her eyes went hard as winter ice. She'd keep her promise. But if Cole Dalton and his men pushed too hard, if they hurt the wrong person, if they crossed the line that Rose had drawn in her mind, well, there were promises. And then there were people worth breaking promises for. Rose McKenna climbed the stairs to her room above the saloon. She didn't sleep, just sat by her window and watched the street, watched shadows move in the rain, watched her town hold its breath. And she waited to see which promise would matter more when morning came. The promise to a dead husband, or the promise she'd made to herself long ago, to protect the innocent, no matter the cost. The rain fell harder, the night grew darker, and in the spaces between thunder, Rose McKenna remembered what it felt like to be the phantom. The second day dawned gray and cold. The rain had stopped, but the clouds remained heavy and threatening. Rose stood behind her bar at 6 in the morning watching Main Street through windows that reflected her pale face back at her. She'd slept maybe 2 hours. Her mind wouldn't stop calculating. 5 men, 4 exits from the saloon, 3 windows, 2 guns hidden under floorboards, 1 promise breaking under the weight of reality. The morning passed with terrible slowness. Pete came in for his coffee, said nothing about the broken window at the general store or the overturned wagon by the livery, just drank his coffee and watched Rose with those knowing eyes. Deputy Nate arrived an hour later. His face was bruised, purple spreading across his left cheek like spilled wine. "What happened?" Rose asked, though she already knew. "Tried to talk to them, about paying for what they took." Nate touched his face gingerly. "That big one they call him Scarface Johnny Rourke, he didn't even use his fist, just backhanded me, like I was a child misbehaving. Where's Sheriff Hobbs? Told me to stand down. Said we wait for help." Nate's voice was bitter. 3 days. Might as well be 3 years. Rose poured him coffee. "Sometimes standing down is the brave choice." "Is it?" Nate looked at her. "Or is it just being a coward with a badge?" She had no answer that wouldn't reveal too much. The door banged open. Abigail Winters stumbled in her dress, torn at the shoulder, her hair wild. Elijah followed, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. Behind them the sound of laughter, cruel and casual. "They're at the store," Abigail gasped, "taking everything. When Elijah tried to stop them, that man Dalton, he just smiled and told Johnny to teach him manners." Rose was already moving, around the bar, toward the door, her body acting before her mind caught up. She registered Reverend Blackwood's hand on her arm, stopping her. "Think, Rose," he said quietly. "Think what happens if you go out there. They're hurting people. And you'll do what 5 guns against 1 woman. Even if you were who you used to be, the math doesn't work." Rose pulled her arm free. But he was right. Going out there angry would just get her killed. Or worse, would force her to become the phantom again. And once she started down that road, once she drew those guns, there was no coming back. She helped Abigail to a chair, got a wet cloth for Elijah's cut, kept her hands busy so they wouldn't shake with rage. The Dalton gang walked past her windows 20 minutes later, Cole in the lead, his men laughing about something, carrying sacks of goods they hadn't paid for. Cole glanced toward the silver dollar, made eye contact with Rose through the glass, touched his hat in mock courtesy. Then they were gone, heading toward Tobias Garrett's saloon, the Lucky Horseshoe, where Toby would serve them and smile and pretend everything was fine, because what else could he do? Abigail was crying, quiet tears that hurt worse than sobs. They said they might come back tonight, said Elijah needed to learn respect, said she couldn't finish. Rose knelt beside her chair, took her hands. "Listen to me, Abigail. You and Elijah, you go to your sister's ranch, the one out past Copper Ridge. You go now. You take the buckboard and you don't stop until you're 20 miles from here. We can't just leave our store. Your store won't matter if you're dead." Rose squeezed her hands. "Please, just for a few days, until this is over." Elijah met her eyes, saw something there that made him nod slowly. "We'll go. But Rose, what about you? What about everyone else?" "We'll manage," Rose said. They left within the hour. Rose watched them go. 2 more people safe. But how many others were there? How many would she have to watch leave before Shadow Creek was just empty buildings and memories? The day crawled toward evening. Tobias Garrett came to the Silver Dollar just before sunset. His saloon was closer to the boarding house where the Dalton gang had taken rooms. He'd seen more of them than anyone. "They're planning something," Toby said. He was 40 with thinning hair and nervous hands that never stopped moving. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. "Heard them talking. Something about staying a week, maybe longer. They're waiting for someone." "Who?" Rose asked. "Didn't say a name. But Cole, he kept mentioning his brother. Said his brother had bigger plans for this territory. Said when he arrived things would really get interesting." A brother. Rose's stomach turned cold. If Cole Dalton was this dangerous, what kind of man would his brother be? "How long until this brother arrives?" Rose asked. 2 days, maybe 3. They weren't clear. Toby leaned closer. His breath smelled like whiskey. His eyes wouldn't quite meet hers. "Rose, I need to tell you something. About your place." "What about it?" I might have mentioned that you do good business, that Jack left you well off, that you probably have money hidden somewhere." His eyes finally lifted to hers, guilt written across every line of his face. "They were asking questions, pressing me. I thought if I gave them something, they'd leave me alone." Rose felt ice spread through her veins. "What exactly did you tell them, Toby?" "That you probably keep your earnings in a safe, back room maybe." "I didn't know for sure, I was just guessing, but they seemed real interested." He wrung his hands. "I'm sorry, I was scared. They were going to burn my place if I didn't give them something useful. So he'd given them Rose instead. Given them a target. Put a mark on her back to save his own skin." "Get out," Rose said quietly. "Rose, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "Get out of my saloon." Toby fled. The door closed behind him. Rose stood in the middle of her empty bar and felt the walls closing in. The Dalton gang knew she had money, knew where she lived, knew she was alone, and in 2 or 3 days Cole's brother would arrive with more men and bigger plans. Doc Brennan found her there an hour later, still standing, still thinking. "Rose," he said gently, "they're coming for me, Silas. Tonight, tomorrow, soon. They'll come." "I know." "I could leave, pack a bag and ride out, be gone before morning." "You could," Doc agreed. "Would you?" Rose thought about Jack's grave on the hill, about the saloon they'd built together, about little Della, the 8-year-old orphan who spent her afternoons helping Rose sweep floors and learning to read from the books Jack had left behind, about Pete and Nate and everyone else in Shadow Creek who'd become family without her noticing. "No," she said, "I wouldn't." "Then you need to be ready. I made a promise." Doc's voice was kind but firm. "Jack would understand. He'd want you alive. He'd want you to protect yourself." "It's not about protecting myself. It's about what happens when I let her out." Rose looked at her hands, turned them over, saw them steady now but knew how they'd shake later after. "The Phantom. She doesn't do half measures, Silas. She doesn't wound and walk away. Once I become her again, people die. That's what she does. That's all she's ever done. Sometimes that's what's needed. And sometimes it's just murder with a badge pinned to it." They stood in silence. Outside, the last light faded. Lamps were being lit up and down Main Street. Shadow Creek settling in for another nervous night. "I'll stay tonight," Doc offered, "in case there's trouble." Rose shook her head. "Go home. Be with your wife. If trouble comes, I'll handle it." After he left, Rose locked the doors, checked each window. Then she went to the back room, lifted the floorboard. This time she took out the guns. The Remingtons fit her hands like they'd been made for them, which they had been. Her father had taken her to a gunsmith in Denver when she was 18, had her hands measured, had the grips custom carved, Silver Phoenix engraved on each barrel because her father said she'd risen from the ashes of her mother's death to become something fierce and beautiful and dangerous. Rose strapped on the gun belt. The weight settled on her hips. Familiar. Right. She drew once, smooth and fast, the gun clearing leather in less than a second. Her hand remembered. Her body remembered. The Phantom remembered. She holstered the weapon. Both revolvers fully loaded, 12 shots. More than enough if it came to shooting, but she wouldn't draw unless forced. That was the line. She'd wear them. Be ready. But she wouldn't draw first. Wouldn't become the aggressor. If she could avoid shooting, she would. If she could scare them off with a threat, she would. And if she couldn't, well, Then she'd break her promise and pray Jack would forgive her from whatever heaven carpenters went to when they died. Rose blew out the lamps, sat in darkness, waited. Midnight came and went. The saloon creaked and settled. Outside a dog barked. Footsteps passed by heading home late. Normal sounds of a town sleeping. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, maybe they weren't coming tonight. Maybe Toby had been wrong or lying or... Glass shattered, not her window, somewhere down the street. A woman screamed. The sound cut off abruptly. Rose was at the window in an instant. Saw shapes moving in the darkness. Saw flames. The general store. They'd set fire to the abandoned general store. The Winters had fled, but their building was burning. Then she saw them dragging someone. Not from the store. From somewhere else. A woman. Rose's heart stopped. Sarah Miller, the schoolteacher, 26 years old, unmarried, lived alone in rooms above the schoolhouse. She must have seen the fire, come out to see what was happening, run right into them. They had her in the street, 4 of them, Cole Dalton, Scarface Johnny, the 2 Harker brothers, Cain and Abel, moving in perfect synchronization. The nervous kid Davy wasn't with them. Maybe he'd refused. Maybe he was standing watch. Didn't matter. What mattered was Sarah Miller fighting and screaming and 4 men laughing. Then gunshots, not at Sarah, at something else, someone else. Rose saw a figure on the ground, saw the deputy's badge catch firelight. Nate. They'd shot Nate. Rose's hand moved to her gun, stopped. If she went out there, she'd have to shoot, would have to kill, would become the Phantom again, would break every promise. But if she stayed inside, Sarah would be raped. Nate might die. The town would burn. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Rose McKenna opened her door and stepped into the night. She walked down the middle of Main Street, both hands at her sides, not touching the guns yet, just walking. The firelight cast her shadow long and dark behind her. Her boots struck the dirt with purpose, each step deliberate. Cole Dalton saw her first. He was closest to Sarah, had been reaching for the woman's torn dress. He stopped, straightened. A slow grin spread across his face. Well, well, the widow comes out to play. His men turned, saw Rose. Scarface Johnny let go of Sarah's arm. The woman scrambled away, crawling toward the boardwalk. The Harker brothers moved to flank Cole, mirror images of readiness. All of them armed, all of them confident. Let her go, Rose said. Her voice carried clear in the night air, calm, cold, the voice of someone who'd said those words before and meant them. Or what? Cole asked. He was enjoying this. Thought he had the upper hand. 5 guns against 1 woman. Easy odds in his mind. Or I'll give you 1 chance to ride out. Tonight. Now. All of you. Cole laughed, rich and genuinely amused. You threatening us, widow? You got some hidden help? Some men waiting in the shadows? No men, Rose said. Just me. Just you. Cole took a step forward, studying her in the firelight. And what exactly are you going to do? Ask us nicely to leave. Rose's hands moved to her hips, rested on the grips of her Remingtons. I'm going to give you what I give everyone. 1 warning, 1 chance. After that, consequences are on you. Something in her voice made Cole hesitate, made him really look at her for the first time. Saw the way she stood, the way her hands rested on those guns like they belonged there, the complete absence of fear in her eyes, the stillness of someone who'd done this before. You know how to use those, he asked. Better than you know how to use yours. Scarface Johnny laughed, harsh and mocking. Boss, she's got spirit. I like spirit in a woman. Makes breaking them more fun. He took a step toward Rose. His hand went to his gun. Rose drew. The movement was faster than thought, faster than sight. One moment her hands were on the grips. The next, the Remington was up and firing, and the sound was like thunder in the narrow street. The bullet hit Johnny's gun just as it cleared leather, hit it perfectly. The revolver spun out of his hand, flew 15 feet, clattered on the ground. Johnny stared at his empty hand, at the gun lying in the dirt, at Rose standing with her smoking Remington pointed at his chest. Dead silence. Even the fire seemed to quiet. Cole's grin was gone. The Harker brothers had their hands near their guns but hadn't drawn, frozen by what they'd just witnessed. No one moved that fast. No one shot that accurately. It was impossible. That was your warning, Rose said. Her voice hadn't changed. Still calm, still cold. The next bullet goes through flesh, not steel. She shifted her aim to Cole, the Remington unwavering. Mrs. Miller goes free. You take your wounded pride and leave Shadow Creek. You ride out tonight and you don't come back." "You shot my gun," Johnny said. His voice was shaking. "You shot my gun clean out of my hand." "I did." "That's impossible. Nobody's that fast. Nobody's that accurate." "Somebody is," Rose said. "Now pick up your gun and ride." Cole's face had gone very still, very thoughtful. His eyes moved over Rose, taking in details he'd missed before. The way she held the gun, the way she stood, the complete confidence. Recognition dawned slowly. "I know you," he said slowly. "Not your face, but that draw, that shot. There's only one person I've ever heard of who could shoot like that." "Doesn't matter who I am," Rose said. "Matters what I'm telling you. Leave." "The Phantom," Cole breathed. The name came out like a prayer or a curse. "You're the Phantom, Rose Tucker, the marshal's daughter." The name hung in the air. Sarah Miller gasped from where she'd crawled to safety. Somewhere a window opened, townspeople watching, listening. The secret Rose had kept for 2 years spoken aloud for everyone to hear. Rose kept her gun steady on Cole's chest. "Last chance, Dalton. Ride out." Cole's shock was turning to something else. Calculation, interest, hunger for a different kind of prize than he'd been expecting. The Phantom, in Shadow Creek, playing at being a widow. He began to smile again, but it was different now. Sharper, more dangerous. "My brother is going to be very interested to meet you. Your brother isn't my concern. You are, and you're leaving. Now." "We'll leave," Cole said, held up his hands in mock surrender. "For tonight. But this isn't over, Widow. Not by a long shot." He looked at his men. "Mount up. We're going back to the boarding house." "You're leaving Shadow Creek," Rose said. "We're leaving the street. We'll discuss the rest in the morning. After you've had time to think about what happens when Marcus arrives." Cole's voice went soft. "Dangerous." "You shot a gun out of Johnny's hand. Impressive. Legendary even. But can you shoot 4 of us before we put you down? Can you protect this whole town? Every person, every building, every child?" He let the implications settle. Let the threat hang in the air like smoke. Then he touched his hat in that mocking gesture Rose was beginning to hate. "Sleep well, Phantom. We'll talk tomorrow." They left. Helped Johnny retrieve his ruined gun, mounted horses that had been tied nearby. Rode slow down Main Street toward the boarding house. Cole turned in his saddle once, met Rose's eyes. The message was clear. This wasn't over, not even close. Rose held her position until they were out of sight. Then she holstered her gun, turned to Sarah Miller. "Are you hurt?" "No. Scared but not hurt. Thanks to you." Sarah was staring at her with wide eyes. "Rose, what he said, about you being—" "Go home, Sarah. Lock your door. Stay inside tomorrow." Nate groaned from where he lay on the ground. Rose knelt beside him. The bullet had grazed his shoulder. Painful, but not fatal. Doc Brennan appeared from the shadows, medical bag in hand. He'd been watching, waiting, ready. "I told you to go home," Rose said. "And I told you I keep my promises." Doc examined Nate's wound with practiced efficiency. "He'll live, needs stitches and rest." More townspeople emerged. They gathered at a careful distance, staring at Rose, at the guns on her hips, at the woman they'd thought they knew revealed as someone completely different. Reverend Blackwood pushed through the crowd. His face was grave. "Rose Tucker," he said. Not a question, a confirmation. "That girl died 2 years ago," Rose replied. "Apparently, she's been resurrected." Blackwood looked at the burning store, at Nate bleeding on the ground, at the townspeople's frightened faces. "We need to talk, all of us, now." They gathered in the church an hour later, 30 people, most of Shadow Creek's adults. They filled the pews while Rose stood at the front, still wearing her guns, still ready. The badge her father had given her pinned to her shirt where everyone could see it. Deputy U.S. Marshal. Sheriff Hobbs spoke first. "Is it true what Dalton said?" "Yes," Rose answered. No point in lying now. "My name was Rose Tucker. I was a U.S. Deputy Marshal from 1871 to 1875. I tracked outlaws, brought them in. Sometimes I had to kill them." "How many?" someone asked from the back. A man Rose didn't know well. Farmer from outside town. 14 confirmed. Silence, heavy and thick. Then Pete's voice calm and sure. "And you came here because—" "I came here to find peace. I married Jack McKenna. We built a life. I thought I could be someone different, someone better." "But you're not," Tobias Garrett said. His voice was accusing, guilty, defensive. You're still a killer. I haven't killed anyone in 2 years, Rose said. I gave it up. Tried to leave that life behind. Tried to be just Rose McKenna. But you couldn't. This from a woman Rose recognized but couldn't name. Fear in her voice. Once a killer, always a killer. Maybe, Rose admitted. But I tried. I tried so hard to be normal, to run a saloon and live quiet and hurt nobody, and I was doing it. Until tonight. So what now? Sheriff Hobbs asked. The practical question cutting through the emotion. Rose looked at their faces, saw fear, saw judgment, saw a few expressions of understanding, saw people she'd lived among for 2 years trying to reconcile the woman they knew with the legend Cole Dalton had named. Now you have a choice, Rose said. I can leave, pack my things and be gone before sunrise. The Dalton gang will probably leave too once I'm not here. You'll be safe. Or, Reverend Blackwood prompted, or I stay, and when Cole Dalton comes back tomorrow when his brother Marcus arrives with more men, I deal with them. The way I used to. The way the Phantom dealt with outlaws. You mean kill them, Tobias said. Flat, accusatory. If I have to, if they force it. Yes. The debate erupted. Voices raised. Some wanted her gone. Some wanted her to stay. Some were too frightened to have an opinion. Rose stood silent and let them argue about her fate. About their fate. About what kind of town they wanted to be. Finally, Sheriff Hobbs raised his hand. The voices quieted. Let's vote. All in favor of Rose leaving, raise your hand. 7 hands went up. Tobias Garrett's among them. A few others Rose didn't know well. All in favor of her staying. 23 hands, including Pete, including Doc Brennan, including, after a long moment of internal struggle, Reverend Blackwood. It's decided, Hobbs said. You stay. You protect us. You do what needs doing. Rose nodded slowly, felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. The responsibility, the promise she was about to break, the blood that would inevitably come. There's something else you should know, Rose said. Marcus Dalton, Cole's brother. He's not just an outlaw. He's the man who killed my father. The church went silent. Pin drop quiet. August 1875. Red Creek Canyon ambush. Marshal William Tucker was transporting a payroll. Marcus Dalton's gang attacked. My father was shot. Gut wound. Took him 3 days to die from infection. Rose's voice was steady, but her hands were trembling. She clasped them together to hide it. I've been looking for Marcus Dalton for 3 years, and now he's coming here, to my town, to the place I tried to build a life. So this is about revenge, someone said. Not accusing, just stating. No, this is about justice and protection, and maybe some revenge too. I won't lie to you about that. Rose met their eyes, but mostly it's about making sure Marcus Dalton doesn't do to Shadow Creek what he did to my father, what his gang has done to 6 other towns, what they'll do if nobody stops them. Doc Brennan stood. What do you need from us? Preparation, training. Anyone who can shoot needs to learn tactics. We fortify, we plan, we make them pay for every inch of ground. When does Marcus arrive? Hobbs asked. 2 days according to what Tobias overheard, maybe 3. We use that time to get ready. 2 or 3 days to turn shopkeepers and ranchers into something resembling a fighting force. 2 or 3 days before Rose Tucker became the Phantom again and broke every promise she'd made to a dead husband who'd believed she could be more than a gun. They spent the rest of the night planning. Rose showed them firing positions, taught Deputy Nate how to breathe and squeeze instead of jerking the trigger, explained crossfire and flanking and how to make an enemy funnel into a kill zone. The language came back to her easily, too easily, like she'd never stopped being a deputy marshal. Like the 2 years of peace had been the dream, and this preparation for violence was the reality. Dawn came cold and gray. The townspeople dispersed to prepare, to fortify their homes, to pray. Rose returned to the Silver Dollar alone, stood in the middle of her empty saloon, looked at everything she and Jack had built, everything she was about to risk, everything that would probably burn before this was over. She walked to the back room, knelt by the floorboards, reached under and pulled out the last item she'd hidden. The letters, the black ribbon, Jack's final words written in a shaking hand. I'm sorry, she whispered to his memory. I tried. I really tried to keep my promise, but they're coming, and if I don't stop them, everyone dies. Everyone. She pressed the letters to her chest, let herself feel the grief, the guilt, The anger at Cole Dalton for walking into her town, at Marcus Dalton for killing her father, at fate for never letting her escape who she'd been. Then she carefully refolded the letters, tied the ribbon, placed them back in their hiding spot. Beside them she placed the guns, not hiding them anymore, just storing them safely until they were needed. Rose Tucker McKenna stood, walked back into the main room. The sun was breaking through the clouds. 2 or 3 days until Marcus Dalton arrived. 2 or 3 days until Rose either saved her town or destroyed it. She'd made her choice. Now she'd live with the consequences, or die with them. The third day dawned with false peace. Rose stood on the porch of the Silver Dollar, watching the sun climb over the mountains. The air smelled of pine and coming snow. Winter wasn't done with Montana yet, despite the calendar saying spring had arrived. The town was different now. Everyone knew what she was. The Phantom, the legend. Some looked at her with hope, some with fear. All with a new wariness, like they'd been living next to a loaded gun for 2 years without knowing it. Doc Silas Brennan's body lay in the church wrapped in white linen. They'd found him at dawn yesterday, crawling up Main Street, blood trailing behind him like a scarlet ribbon. Shot in the back. He'd lived long enough to gasp 3 words to Reverend Blackwood: Toby, betrayed, Della. Rose had held his hand while he died, watched the light fade from eyes that had seen too much suffering and tried to ease it anyway. Another good man dead because evil had come to Shadow Creek. Because Tobias Garrett had been weak and scared and willing to sacrifice others to save himself. She touched the badge pinned to her shirt. Her father's badge, the one she'd worn openly since the night she'd revealed herself. It pressed against her heart, cold metal reminding her of promises made and broken and remade. Tobias Garrett sat in Sheriff Hobbs' jail cell. He'd confessed everything when they'd dragged him in. How he'd followed Doc Brennan that night. How he'd overheard the doctor tracking him to Cole Dalton's camp outside town. How he'd met with Cole again, desperate to save his own skin, and told them about Della, the 8-year-old orphan girl who lived with Reverend Blackwood. The child Rose had been quietly caring for, teaching to read, thinking about adopting once enough time had passed after Jack's death. Take the girl, Toby had told them. Rose cares about her. You take the girl, Rose will give you anything. Young Davy, the nervous 17-year-old, had been standing guard, had panicked when Doc stumbled on their meeting, had fired without thinking. The bullet had torn through Doc's lung. Now Davy was in the cell next to Toby. He'd surrendered the next morning, riding into town with his hands up, crying, saying he never meant to kill nobody. Rose had let him live, put him in a cell to await trial, because that's what lawmen did. That's what her father would have done. And Della was safe in the church vault, with Reverend Blackwood standing guard armed with a rifle and the cold determination of a man who'd seen combat before he found God. The Harker brothers, Cain and Abel, sat in a third cell. Rose had captured them the night of Doc's death. They'd tried to ambush her at the saloon, thinking she'd be distracted by grief. They'd thought wrong. Both were wounded but alive. Would stand trial for attempted murder once this was over, if any of them survived to see a trial. Rose stepped off the porch. Her boots struck the wooden walkway with purpose. She wore a split riding skirt, practical for movement, a dark jacket over her white shirt. The twin Remingtons rode her hips openly now. Let them see. Let them know. The Phantom had returned. She walked to the livery where Deputy Nate was positioning the last of their defenders. His shoulder was bandaged, but his eyes were clear. Rose had spent the past 2 days teaching him to think like a soldier instead of a lawman, anticipate instead of react, prepare instead of respond. All set, she asked, as will ever be. Nate gestured to the positions they'd established. Mr. Patterson on the general store roof. The Harley brothers covering the east approach. Mrs. Sullivan and her daughters have the boarding house second floor. Everyone who could shoot had been given a position, a field of fire, and instructions to aim for center mass. Rose nodded. Shadow Creek had maybe 15 people who could shoot well enough to matter. Against Marcus Dalton's forces, the numbers would be close. But numbers didn't tell the whole story. Marcus's men were veterans, hardened killers. Her people were shopkeepers and ranchers who'd probably never shot at another human being. Remember what I taught you? Rose said. Don't aim for heroics, aim for survival. Make them come to us. Make them pay for every step. And if it goes bad, then you get everyone to the church. Reverend Blackwood knows the escape routes through the canyon. You get them out of town and you ride hard for Helena." "What about you?" Rose touched her guns. "I'll buy you the time you need." Nate started to protest. Rose cut him off with a look. "This is my fight, Nate, my past coming due. I won't ask anyone else to die for it." She left before he could argue, walked back to Main Street, stood in the middle of the empty road and looked at Shadow Creek. At the buildings Jack had helped raise, at the church where they'd married, at the cemetery on the hill where he rested under a simple wooden cross she'd carved herself. "I'm sorry," she whispered to his memory. "I know I promised, but I can't let them hurt these people. Can't let them take what we built." The wind carried her words away. No answer came, just the creaking of signs and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Then she heard them. Horses, many horses, coming from the east at an easy lope. Rose's hand moved to her gun, not drawing, just ready. They appeared around the bend like something from a nightmare. 15 men in military formation, riding in perfect columns, armed with repeating rifles. Moving with the synchronized precision of soldiers who'd trained together so long they didn't need commands. And at their head, riding a black horse that gleamed like polished coal, was Marcus Dalton. He was everything Rose had imagined, and nothing like she'd expected. 52 years old, with silver threading his dark beard, dressed in an expensive black suit under a gray duster. Twin Colt .45. Peacemakers with ivory handles rode his hips. His left hand was missing the ring finger, an old wound from some forgotten battle that had probably killed the man who'd taken it. But it was his eyes that marked him. Cold, intelligent, calculating. The eyes of a man who'd commanded troops in war and decided that peacetime was just war with different rules and fewer consequences. The formation stopped 50 yards from where Rose stood. Marcus raised his hand. His men halted as one. The precision was almost beautiful. Almost made you forget these were killers and rapists and men who burned towns for profit. Marcus dismounted with the ease of someone who'd spent his life in the saddle. He walked forward alone, stopped 30 feet from Rose, studied her with the same attention he'd probably given to maps before battle. "Rose Tucker," he said. His voice was educated, Virginia accent softened by years out west, but still carrying the refined tones of someone who'd been raised with money and breeding. "William Tucker's daughter, the Phantom. I've wanted to meet you for a very long time." "Marcus Dalton, the man who murdered my father." "Murdered is such a harsh word," Marcus smiled. It was a pleasant expression, charming even, which made it more terrible. "I shot an armed federal marshal who was transporting a payroll I wanted. In war, we'd call that combat. In this territory, it's just business. My father died in agony, 3 days of fever and infection, because of your bullet." "Yes, I'm aware. I kept track." Marcus tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "He spoke of you those 3 days, delirious from fever but still talking about his daughter. How fast you were, how smart, how you'd track me down someday and make me pay." He spread his hands in a gesture of inevitability. "And here you are." Rose's jaw tightened. "Here I am? Except you're not here for revenge, are you?" Marcus looked past her at Shadow Creek, at the shuttered windows and fortified positions that weren't quite as hidden as the townspeople thought. "You're here to protect this little town, these simple people. You've gone soft, Rose Tucker, found a life, found peace, even tried to forget who you are." "I know exactly who I am." "Do you?" Marcus took a step closer. "Because the woman I've heard about the Phantom, she wouldn't have hesitated 2 nights ago. She would have killed my brother Cole when he threatened that schoolteacher. Would have put bullets through all 4 of them before they could draw, but you didn't. You shot a gun out of a hand and let them walk away." He smiled again. "That's not the Phantom. That's a woman trying to be something she's not. Maybe I'm trying to be something better. There is no better for people like us, only alive or dead, only winning or losing." Marcus gestured at his men, professional soldiers sitting their horses like statues. "I have 15 trained veterans, men who've killed more times than they can count. You have shopkeepers and ranchers playing soldier. We'll see." "Yes, we will." Marcus's expression grew serious, businesslike. "But it doesn't have to be that way. I'll make you the same offer I made through Cole. Leave, take whoever you want with you. Ride out today. I'll let you go. I'll even give you an hour head start before I ride after you. Sporting chance. And Shadow Creek. Burns. But the people live if they surrender the moment you're gone. They give me what I need, they scatter, and I let them scatter. No blood except the buildings. He said it so reasonably, like he was offering her a business proposition instead of describing the destruction of everything she cared about. Rose's hand moved closer to her gun. What exactly do you need from Shadow Creek? There's no bank, no payroll, nothing worth this much effort. Ah, Marcus's smile widened, genuinely pleased. You really don't know. Nobody told you. He glanced back at his men, then to the town. Next week, the territorial governor arrives here to sign the railroad expansion contract. $200,000 in bonds, authorization for 3 new rail lines through Montana, the contract that will determine who controls this territory's future for the next 20 years. The pieces fell into place in Rose's mind. You need Shadow Creek destroyed, so the governor can't come here. So the contract goes somewhere else. Goes to Helena, where I control the banks, where my people will redirect those bonds into ventures that benefit me. Marcus nodded appreciatively, like a teacher pleased with a student's insight. Smart girl. Your father would be proud. You're going to kill an entire town to steal railroad bonds. I'm going to burn an empty town to redirect railroad bonds. The killing is optional. Depends entirely on whether you leave or stay. He said it so calmly, like discussing the weather. Like the lives of 247 people were just numbers in a ledger to be balanced. Rose looked at him, really looked. Saw a man who'd found a way to justify anything, who'd turned strategy and tactics into tools for evil, who could smile while describing mass murder because to him it was just another campaign, just another objective to achieve. I'm staying, she said. Then you'll die, along with everyone you're trying to protect. Maybe, but you'll bleed for it. Every step, every building, every inch of ground. Rose's voice was cold as winter, hard as iron. I'll make you pay in blood for every person you hurt, and when it's done, when we're both dead, and Shadow Creek is ashes at least, I'll know I tried to be more than just a killer. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. You really believe that, don't you? That there's honor in this? That protecting these people makes you better than me? I know it does. Then you're a fool. Marcus turned away, walked back toward his men, stopped after 10 paces, looked over his shoulder. Sunrise tomorrow. That gives you until dawn to change your mind, to save their lives and yours. After that, we attack. He paused. And Rose Tucker I never lose, not battles, not wars, not anything. He mounted his horse. His men formed up around him in perfect order. They rode back the way they'd come, not hurrying, confident, already certain of victory. Rose watched them go. Then she turned and walked back to the Silver Dollar, found Reverend Blackwood waiting on the porch with a little girl holding his hand. Della, 8 years old with dark hair and eyes too serious for a child. She broke free from the Reverend's hand and ran to Rose. Miss Rose! She crashed into Rose's legs, hugging tight. Rose knelt down, pulled the girl close. What are you doing out of the vault, sweet pea? Reverend Blackwood said I could see you, said you needed to see me too. Rose looked up at Blackwood. The Reverend's face was grave. She needs to know Rose, in case Rose didn't come back, in case tomorrow went as badly as they all feared it might. Rose took Della's small hands in hers. I need to tell you something important, about you and me. I know, Della said simply. Reverend Blackwood told me, about the papers, about you and Mr. Jack wanting to adopt me, about how I'm supposed to be your daughter, but it never got made legal. Did he tell you I love you? That whether those papers are signed or not, you're mine and I'm yours? Della nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Can I call you Ma just once? In case you don't come back from the fighting. Rose pulled her close again, breathed in the scent of Della's hair, felt the small arms wrapped around her neck. This was what she was fighting for. Not revenge, not even justice. Just this, the right of a little girl to grow up safe, to have a mother, to live without fear. You can call me Ma forever, Rose whispered, and I'm coming back, I promise. Della pulled back, reached into her pocket, pulled out a piece of paper folded small. I made you something. Rose unfolded it, a drawing, crude but clear, a woman with guns facing down monsters that looked like men. Above it, in careful letters, My Ma is brave. Rose's throat tightened. This is beautiful, Sweet Pea. You keep it. For luck. Della's voice was solemn. Adult in a way no 8-year-old should be. And you remember I'm waiting, so you have to come back. Rose tucked the drawing carefully into her shirt pocket, kissed Della's forehead. I will, I promise. Reverend Blackwood took Della's hand. Time to go back to the vault, little one. I love you, Ma, Della said as they walked away. Rose stood watching until they disappeared into the church. Then she turned and found half the town waiting in the street. Come to see her, to hear what Marcus had said, to know what tomorrow would bring. She told them about the railroad contract, about Marcus's plan, about the choice he'd given her, leave or fight, save herself or save them. Anyone who wants to leave, go now, Rose said. Take your families, ride for Helena or Butte or anywhere that isn't here. I'll buy you time to get clear. Nobody moved. We voted you in, Sheriff Hobbs said, his old voice steady. We don't abandon our own. This isn't your fight. It became our fight when we asked you to protect us, Pete said. The old man stood straight despite his 70 years. When we voted to let the Phantom wake up, you're not alone, Rose, not this time. The afternoon became preparation. Final preparation. Rose walked through town one last time, checking positions, offering advice, seeing the fear in people's eyes and wishing she could promise them everything would be fine. She couldn't, because it wouldn't be. Sheriff Hobbs pulled her aside. I was at Shiloh, he said. April 1862. Saw 23,000 men die in 2 days. Thought I'd seen the worst humanity had to offer. And now? Now I think evil doesn't need war. Doesn't need a cause or a flag. Sometimes it just is. Sometimes it just walks into your town and takes what it wants. Not this time, Rose said. No. Hobbs extended his hand. Not this time. Whatever happens tomorrow, Rose Tucker, it's been an honor. They shook. His grip was firm despite the arthritis. The sun set blood red over the mountains. Shadow Creek held its breath. Rose sat in her empty saloon one last time, ran her fingers over the bar Jack had built, remembered his hands, his laugh, his belief that she could be more than what she'd been. I tried, Jack, she whispered. I tried so hard to be what you wanted, but they didn't give me a choice. She cleaned her guns one final time, loaded them, checked every mechanism, everything perfect, everything ready. Midnight came. Rose didn't sleep, just sat by her window watching the stars wheel overhead, time passing, bringing dawn closer, bringing the moment when everything changed. At 4 a.m. she walked to the church, knelt at the vault door, whispered through the crack, Della, you awake? Yes, Ma, the small voice came back. I love you, Sweet Pea. No matter what happens, you remember that? I will. You remember your promise. I will. Rose stood. Found Reverend Blackwood in the shadows. If I fall, Rose said, you get her out. You get her to Helena. You find her a good home. She has a good home. With you. If I fall. Blackwood was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. If you fall. But you won't. You're William Tucker's daughter. You're the Phantom. And you've got something Marcus Dalton will never have. What's that? Something worth protecting. Rose walked back to Main Street as the eastern sky began to lighten. Gray becoming pink, becoming gold. The last sunrise some of them would ever see. At 5:30 movement on the eastern ridge. Marcus Dalton's men taking positions, surrounding the town. No escape now, no running, just the fight. Rose stood in the middle of Main Street, checked her guns one last time, took a deep breath, let it out slow. The sun broke over the mountains. Gold light spilled across Shadow Creek, beautiful and terrible. Marcus himself rode into view. Stopped at the same spot as yesterday, called out across the distance. Last words, Rose Tucker. Come and take it, Rose called back, if you can. Marcus smiled, raised his hand, dropped it. Attack. The battle for Shadow Creek began with thunder. 15 rifles opened fire simultaneously. Bullets whined through the air, shattered windows, splintered wood. The coordinated volley of professional soldiers who knew their business. Rose was already moving, diving behind a water trough as bullets chewed the ground where she'd been standing. Nate's rifle barked from the bell tower. Mr. Patterson fired from the store roof. The townspeople returned fire not coordinated, but determined. Marcus's men advanced in 3 groups. 8 men straight down Main Street. 4 flanking left through the alleys. 3 going right toward the church. Military precision against desperate civilians. Rose drew both Remingtons. sighted on the center group, fired. A man fell from his horse. Fired again, another down. Her hands moved like they'd never stopped, like the 2 years had been nothing, like she'd always been the Phantom and never anything else. The left flank reached the alley. Tripwires Rose had set snapped tight. Barrels cascaded down from rooftops. 2 men went down horses screaming. The other 2 scattered for cover. The right flank hit Reverend Blackwood's ambush. The former cavalry scout had positioned himself perfectly. 3 shots, 3 men wounded or dead. His aim hadn't deteriorated with age, but Marcus's men were professionals. They adapted, returned fire with devastating accuracy. Mr. Patterson cried out from the roof hit. Mrs. Sullivan's daughter screamed. The sound cut short. Rose ran, building to building, firing from new positions, making them work for every inch. Her mind was cold and clear. This was what she'd been, what she'd always been underneath the widow's disguise, a killer with a badge. Cole Dalton appeared from the boarding house with scar-faced Johnny. Cole's eyes found Rose, pure hatred on his face. They'd wounded his pride. Now he wanted blood. "There!" Cole shouted. "Fired!" The bullet missed Rose by inches. She returned fire, hit Johnny in the leg. The big man went down cursing. Cole dove for cover. The battle became chaos, smoke filling the street, screams and gunfire, the smell of blood and cordite. Rose lost count of shots fired, lost count of men down, just kept moving, kept shooting, kept fighting. A bullet grazed her arm, burned like fire but didn't slow her. Another creased her ribs. She ignored it. Pain was distant. Death was close. She danced between them like she always had. Nate's position went silent. Rose looked up, saw the deputy slumped in the bell tower. Dead or wounded she couldn't tell. Another good person paying for her past. Marcus's voice cut through the chaos. "Burn them out!" Fire arrows arced into the sky, landed on roofs. The general store caught first, then the boarding house, then the silver dollar. Rose watched her home burn, watched Jack's work turn to ash and ember. Felt something break inside her. Not grief, rage, cold and pure and absolute. She stepped into the middle of Main Street, both guns up, started walking toward Marcus's position, firing as she went, not hiding, not caring, just advancing like death itself. Men fell before her. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her guns spoke with perfect rhythm. Each shot found its mark. The Phantom in full fury was a thing of terrible beauty. Marcus saw her coming. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. This wasn't the widow. This wasn't even the careful deputy marshal. This was something primal. Something that wouldn't stop until one of them was dead. "All of you," Marcus shouted to his remaining men. "Take her down." 6 rifles swung toward Rose. 6 men fired. Rose dove, rolled, came up shooting. 2 men fell. She rolled again. Another fell. The survivors scattered, but there were too many guns, too many bullets. Rose felt one punch into her left shoulder, spun her around. She kept her feet, kept fighting. Another hit her thigh. Her leg buckled. She went to one knee. Marcus was advancing now, seeing his chance, both peacemakers drawn. "It's over, Rose Tucker." Rose looked up at him through the smoke and pain, smiled, cold and terrible. "Not yet," she fired. Both guns. Marcus twisted. One bullet missed. The other took him in the right shoulder, his gun arm. The peacemaker fell from nerveless fingers. Marcus stumbled back, stared at his wounded shoulder, at Rose kneeling in the dirt, bleeding but not beaten. "Impossible," he breathed. "You should have left when I gave you the chance," Rose said. She tried to stand. Her leg wouldn't hold. Blood was running down her side. Her vision was starting to blur. Too much blood loss. Too many wounds. Marcus switched his remaining gun to his left hand. "Awkward but deadly at this range. You fought well. Your father would be proud, but you lose." He raised the gun, aimed at Rose's head. A rifle cracked. Once, twice, 3 times. Marcus jerked, staggered, looked down at the 3 holes in his chest, looked up at the church roof where Reverend Blackwood stood with his rifle smoke curling from the barrel. "But Marcus tried to say. Blood bubbled from his lips. He fell to his knees, looked at Rose one last time. "Just like your father, lawmen always winning." He fell forward, dead before he hit the ground. The firing stopped. Marcus's remaining men, seeing their leader dead, threw down their weapons, hands up, surrendering. Rose tried to stand again. Couldn't. The world was spinning. She heard voices, running feet, hands on her shoulders easing her down. "Miss Rose," Nate's voice. "Not dead after all. Thank God." "Della," Rose managed. "Get Della. Need to see. She's coming. Hold on. Doc's dead, but Mrs. Sullivan knows medicine. She's coming too." Rose's vision was fading. She'd lost too much blood, too many wounds. She'd bought them time, saved the town. But the cost... "Ma," Della's voice, small hands on her face. "Ma, you promised you'd come back." "I'm here, sweet pea," Rose whispered. "I'm here." The world went black. Rose woke to whiteness, clean sheets, the smell of carbolic and bandages, pain distant but insistent in her shoulder and thigh and ribs. She opened her eyes, saw a ceiling she didn't recognize, turned her head, saw Della asleep in a chair beside the bed, small hands stretched out to touch Rose's. "She hasn't left your side in 3 days," Reverend Blackwood's voice said softly. Rose turned the other way, saw him sitting in the corner. 3 days. You were shot 3 times, lost a lot of blood. Mrs. Sullivan said you should have died, said anyone else would have." He smiled slightly. "But you're not anyone else. The town? Standing, wounded but standing. We lost 4 people, Mr. Patterson, Mrs. Sullivan's daughter Ann, the Harley brothers. All died protecting their home." His face was somber. "Marcus Dalton and 12 of his men are dead. 3 more wounded and in custody. Cole Dalton and Scarface Johnny are in the cells with the Harkers waiting for the marshal who finally arrived yesterday." Marshal came. "Once the telegraph line reached the next town over, we sent word. He came with 10 men, took custody of the prisoners, said to tell you he'd need your testimony when you were recovered." Rose closed her eyes, felt tears she hadn't allowed herself during the fight finally come. "Doc Brennan, he didn't—" "No, we buried him next to Jack. I think he'd have liked that, being near his friend." Della stirred, opened her eyes, saw Rose awake. "Ma, you're awake." "I am Sweet Pea, and I keep my promises." Della climbed onto the bed, careful of Rose's wounds, curled up beside her. "You scared me." "I'm sorry." "But you won. Reverend Blackwood said you saved everyone." Rose stroked Della's hair, looked past her to Blackwood. "How bad is the town?" "The Silver Dollar is gone, the general store too, the boarding house, a few other buildings damaged but repairable." He paused. "But the people are alive, the families are intact, and the railroad contract was signed 3 days ago. Governor came with an armed escort. Shadow Creek is going to prosper." "Good," Rose whispered. "That's good." Over the next weeks, Rose healed slowly. The shoulder wound was the worst. Mrs. Sullivan said she might never have full strength in that arm again. The thigh would leave a scar, but the bone hadn't shattered. The ribs would ache in cold weather for the rest of her life. Small prices for survival. Tobias Garrett hanged for Doc Brennan's murder. Rose didn't attend the execution, neither did most of the town. Justice was necessary, but celebration was inappropriate. Young Davy was tried and sentenced to 5 years for manslaughter. The judge took into account his age and remorse. He'd serve his time in territorial prison and maybe someday become something better than what he'd almost been. Cole Dalton and his remaining men went to trial in Helena. All were convicted, all hanged. Rose didn't attend those either. Their deaths were justice, but they gave her no satisfaction, just a sense of completion, an ending. The Harker brothers, Cain and Abel, went to prison for attempted murder, 20 years each. They'd be old men when they got out, if they got out. 1 month after the battle, Rose stood in the ruins of the Silver Dollar. Nothing left but blackened timbers and memories. She'd thought it would hurt more, but it was just a building. Jack wasn't in the wood and nails. He was in her heart, always would be. "We could rebuild," Reverend Blackwood said beside her. "No," Rose said. "This chapter is closed." "What will you do?" Rose looked at the mountains, at the town spreading out around her, at the new buildings already going up. Shadow Creek was healing, growing. The railroad money was bringing prosperity. People were coming. The territory was changing. "I'm going to build a house," Rose said, "on the hill, near Jack's grave. Della and I will live there." "And the guns." Rose touched the Remingtons at her hips. She'd worn them every day since the battle. Some habits were hard to break. "They stay loaded and ready, just in case. Will there be a next time?" "I hope not, but if there is, I'll be ready." 3 months later, the house was finished. Small but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a porch with a view of the whole valley. Rose and Della moved in on a Tuesday. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a rider appeared. Young man, maybe 25, U.S. Marshal badge gleaming on his vest. "Mrs. McKenna," he called out. Rose stood, hand instinctively moving toward her gun. Old habits. "That's me. I'm Marshal James Carson, from the Territorial Office in Helena." He dismounted, approached with his hands visible, respectful. "Mind if I speak with you a moment?" "Go ahead." Carson pulled a document from his saddlebag, official-looking, sealed with wax. "We've been authorized to rebuild the Deputy Marshal program in Montana Territory. We need experienced deputies, people who know the land, know the work." He extended the document. "You'd be my first choice." Rose took the paper, looked at it, her name already written in as Deputy U.S. Marshal. All she had to do was sign. For a long moment she was tempted. This was who she'd been, who she was good at being. The Phantom, the fastest draw, the legend. She looked at Della sitting on the porch. The girl was reading, practicing the letters Rose taught her every evening. Safe, happy, alive because Rose had protected her. "I appreciate the offer, Marshal Carson," Rose said, handed the paper back unsigned. "But I already have a job, most important one there is. Ma'am, I'm a mother, and this town's guardian. That's enough for me." Carson looked disappointed, but unsurprised. "I understand, but if you change your mind, I won't. But if Montana Territory needs help, if there's a situation that requires someone with my particular skills, you know where to find me." "Fair enough," Carson tipped his hat. "It's an honor to have met you, Mrs. McKenna. The Phantom." "Just Rose now," she said. "The Phantom's retired." Carson rode away. Rose returned to the porch, sat beside Della. The girl looked up from her book. "What did he want, Ma?" "Offered me my old job back." "Are you going to take it?" Rose pulled Della close. "Not a chance, sweet pea. You and me were staying right here, building our life, being a family." "Good," Della said. Went back to her reading. Rose sat watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and red. Her guns were on the chair beside her, cleaned and oiled, loaded and ready, just in case. But she hoped more than she'd hoped for anything since Jack died, that she'd never need them again. Rose McKenna lived to be 74 years old. Della grew up, became a schoolteacher, married a good man from Helena. They gave Rose 3 grandchildren who called her Nana and loved her stories about the old days, stories that got a little taller with each telling. Shadow Creek prospered. The railroad brought progress and growth. By 1900, it was a proper city. By 1910, it had electric lights and telephone lines and automobiles that scared the horses. Rose never wore a badge again, but she kept her guns, oiled them weekly, kept them loaded on the porch, just in case never came. The legend was enough. The stories were enough. The knowledge that the Phantom lived on that hill watching over Shadow Creek was enough to keep trouble away. She died in her sleep on a cold January night in 1923. Della found her in the morning, peaceful. A letter on her bedside table addressed to her daughter. Inside just a few words. "Be more than I was. Be better than I was. Be happy. Promise me. Love, Ma." They buried her next to Jack. The whole town came, nearly 1,000 people, some who'd known her, some who'd only heard the stories, all paying respects to the woman who'd saved Shadow Creek and then spent the rest of her life trying to be something more than a gun. On her tombstone they carved Rose McKenna, 1850 to 1923, wife, mother, guardian, the Phantom who found peace. And on quiet nights when the wind blows through Shadow Creek, old-timers still tell stories. About the widow who was really a legend. About the fastest draw in 4 territories. About the woman who proved you could be both fierce and kind. Both a warrior and a mother. Both the Phantom and Rose. About the woman who fought when she had to and loved when she could. And that more than any gun was the legacy that mattered.